Two of the top candidates in the Democratic field have taken a different take on the value of the billionaire class, and an AOC endorsement is also netting big results for candidate Bernie Sanders.
We are back with Niambi Carter, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Howard University, and also Chrissy Clark, staff writer at The Federalist. So this was interesting. You know, we talk a lot on the show about the differences between Sanders and Warren, because while some of the surface level policy ideas are the same, they seem to be appealing to very different coalitions. They have different theories of change. And I think one of those differences has really been teased out recently in their approach to how they think about the billionaire class. So Bernie Sanders, typical Bernie Sanders, we can put his tweet up on the screen. He just says literally billionaires shouldn't exist, right? End of story. Okay. Billionaires shouldn't exist. There you go. Well, Elizabeth Warren got asked in a candidate forum this weekend in South Carolina whether billionaires should exist. Let's take a listen to her answer.
Bernie Sanders says there should be no billionaires. Do you agree with that?
No.
Why not?
Look, somebody has a great idea and they follow it through and they work hard and they build something. Good for them.
That's
it actually
yeah.
sounds just like what she's been in this feud with this Leon Cooperman guy, and it sounds very much actually like what he says about himself in the billionaire class.
Yeah, I mean, I think she said what she could, because if she would have said something similar, people are like, oh, look at these socialists. But I think what she's getting at is we are not saying that people should not be allowed to amass wealth. And I think what Bernie is saying, we shouldn't allow people to amass that much wealth. Let's be clear, he's a millionaire, right? He's not a billionaire, but he's not poor by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think what they're getting at is this idea that, or Bernie more specifically, is that when you are in a country with such great differences between the haves and the have-nots, it is a real question to ponder. Why should there be billionaires, right? Not to suggest we're going to take all their money and redistribute it, although I think there's some who feel that, but definitely we should not live in a country where there are people sleeping on the street when there's so much wealth clearly able to be recorded by one person.
It's a values question. I think that's really well said, because, you know, part of the lie, in my view, of this country is that anyone is really so superior in their intellect and their business capabilities, et cetera, that they deserve more money that they could ever spend in a lifetime, while other people are so unworthy that they should have to work 3 jobs and still not be able to make it. That, to me, is what this whole conversation is about. Not to mention that, you know, if you're an American billionaire and came up here, you relied on this society and the things that had to benefit. You did not get there all on your own. You benefited from this great country, and so to just turn around and be like, well, I did it, I deserve it all, and I should get to say what I do with all of it, I think is absurd.
Yeah, I think right now that in terms of the clip, I just think that this is actually at large, it just totally tells you the difference between the Sanders and the Warren campaign. I think Warren is gearing up for the general election. I think she knows very well that she can't say the same things that Bernie does, because Bernie's not going to get the same support. If I had to pick of one of the two, I would pick Elizabeth Warren for sure, because you're going to get
right from the right.
At least. But with Bernie, you know, he's telling you the truth. He's telling you he doesn't think billionaires should exist. Maybe Elizabeth Warren feels the same way, but gosh, she is smart to not say it.
That's part of the issue, and that's why I think this tweet is actually, it's all about signaling, which is I think that they're both coming at it from the same way. They both pretty much support relatively around the same wealth tax. What Bernie's saying is like it's a very simple answer of its aspirational. I don't think he actually believes, or maybe he does, I don't know. But I mean, about billionaires should not exist. It's like that is the framework through which he will adopt all of his policy. Whereas Warren, and this is from a political messaging standpoint, is by being like, yes, they should, but then they have to pay 2% and a compounding interest of 6%. It's just like people are like, what? Like what are you talking about here? And it's interesting because it's like I mean, these are radical taxes that she is proposing. It just came out. The New York Times put out an analysis that if her wealth tax has been imposed in 1982, Bill Gates today would have $13 billion and not $97 billion. Now, obviously, look, you can have a lot of money. But that is a big structural shift you're advocating for. Why not lean into it a little bit?
And I think we are at the moment where you can embrace that, and that actually could be something lots of people could get behind, because you talked about, Chrissy, like Michigan and these places. People are suffering. White folks are suffering. Black folks, brown folks, Native Americans. People can understand why unbridled wealth grab grabs are a problem because they're the people that work for these firms making $7.25 an hour, while the person who owns the company is a multi-billionaire. And I think there is something gross, at least ethically, about somebody who has so much money, and we look at people in Flint who don't even have clean water.
Right.
Something is wrong
been
here.
poisoned by the water because of what the decisions that rich people made, essentially. And where the whole too far left equals unelectable breaks down is when you look at the polls. Sanders is more electable than Warren. He does better in these swing states. I mean, look, things can change, but that's where we are today. And also, if you dig into the polling numbers, he does better with independents. He does better with conservative Democrat voters than Elizabeth Warren does, because he's so populist and so clear, and also because he's so directly against the Democratic Party, which is not a popular institution in this country.
And he's a man. Let's just call it. He's also a man.
But it's interesting to that point, though, which is that AOC, she just endorsed Bernie Sanders. We have a new Politico story that just came out talking about how she has basically given him a huge boost at campaign events in Iowa. I think, 2,200 at the latest campaign event, 2,400.
The biggest rally that anyone's had in Iowa so far with AOC. And I mean, woman of color in a very white state. And, everybody, I remember all this coded language about she's too urban, right? She goes to Iowa and she gets a huge reception. 2,000 to 2,400 people at every single one of her rallies. I mean, it is fascinating to see how much of that support you can garner. Well, really across nationwide. I just think it sets a new tone for our politics, a completely new.
She has star power, right? That is very clear. And I think probably who she's drawing attention from is young Iowans, right? I mean, I think, yes, Iowa is a very white place, but there are also young people and other folks who are interested in the AOC, who have Twitter, who pay attention to her, right? And who look at her as a cool person who's bringing a cool factor to this guy who's otherwise just sort of, barking at us all, right? So I think she's probably bringing in a new constituency. I would be actually really interested to see who the participants, right? Who these additional 2,000 people are. Because my guess is probably young people and others who probably never thought of the caucuses as all that interesting, but now they're sexy.
Right. Well, and young people are his strength to start with.
Yeah, and I mean, I just got off of a college campus. I'm only 22 years old, and I'm the tail beginning of Generation Z. We're all just starting to be able to vote. We're all just coming into the workforce. We're all learning what taxes are and how to pay for college and all those wonderful things. It sucks, but we're all learning about it, and we're now we have to vote for people that are going to, do specific things about these wonderful things we're learning in life. And I think what's happening right now is when you're looking at politics and you only see Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders and old white men, come on, that's boring and that doesn't attract anybody. And so I think for an AOC, I vehemently disagree with everything that she has to say in terms of policy, but she's a rock star. And I think that she drives people out. And I genuinely believe that Donald Trump has that superstar power, and if you want to fight this superstar power with something, it needs to be the same thing.
But what you just said, though, I mean, it really is belied by the data, though, because if Bernie Sanders is old and white and boring, why does he have the strongest support among young people, the most diverse generation of any candidate?
Well, I mean, I think it's part of he's tapping into this sort of blow it up spirit. I mean, he was an independent. He's only a Democrat, so he can run in the primary, right? Let's be clear, there is no independent party. But folks who are independents, and this is the first generation, right? Folks like Chrissy's age, who have not identified with the party in the way that our parents did, or even I did, right? I'm a Gen Xer, I think. These are people who like that independent spirit, this sort of kind of blow it up spirit. We don't have to be wedded to this. I mean, even questions about Iowa and New Hampshire, right? These are conventions that we made up in the 70s. We don't actually have to do this anymore. And I think Bernie is tapping into the idea that we don't have to do this like this anymore.
And that's
you're going to be the drivers.
That's a very attractive spirit whenever you've been saddled with debt and you watch your country in war for 18 years, literally since you were a child. And you're like, you know what, maybe you guys don't have it all figured out. And so, we're just going to press the red button and see what happens. People tried that in 2016 and they're willing to try it again in 2020. It just really it's a huge generational change in our politics. Fascinating moment to watch. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Tomorrow on Rising, the executive director of the U.S. first safe injection site shares how that organization is helping combat the opioid crisis.
And Team Rising is going to be in the house. In honor of Veterans Day, we'd like to take a moment to thank the men and women of our country who served our country well in uniform. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow.
Indeed. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.